Welcome back. Amusement parks are places of joy, laughter, and cherished memories. But what happens when the laughter stops and the rides rust away in silence? This is a tale of one such park, left to decay and haunted by the shadows of its past. Welcome to the world of forgotten thrills and lurking terrors. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when Chris, Jen, Alex, and Lisa decided to embark on an adventure. The group of urban explorers had heard whispers about an old, abandoned amusement park on the outskirts of town. The park, once a bustling destination for families, had been closed for decades, its gates locked and its rides left to rot. Chris had found an old map of the park in a second-hand bookstore. The map, yellowed with age, promised a labyrinth of forgotten attractions and hidden secrets. Intrigued, the group decided to visit the park that coming weekend. As they drove towards their destination, the excitement was palpable. Jen, the group's unofficial historian, recounted the park's history. Abandoned Amusement Park was built in the 1960s. It was hugely popular until a series of accidents led to its closure in the early 80s. They say the park is cursed. Alex, ever the skeptic, laughed. Cursed? It's just an old park. We'll take some photos, explore a bit, and head back. Lisa, however, felt a chill run down her spine. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were heading into something far more sinister. The group arrived at the park just before sunset. The entrance gate, adorned with faded and peeling paint, stood ajar as if inviting them in. Chris pushed the gate open, the rusty hinges creaking ominously. They stepped inside, their footsteps echoing in the empty space. The park was a ghostly shadow of its former self. Weeds had overtaken the pathways, and the once colorful rides were now rusted and broken. The air was thick with the scent of decay and abandonment. As they walked deeper into the park, they came across the old carousel. The once vibrant horses were now faded and chipped, their glassy eyes staring blankly into the distance. Jen took out her camera and began snapping photos. "Look at this place," she said. "It's like time just stopped." Chris pointed towards a building in the distance. "That must be the funhouse. Let's check it out." The funhouse was one of the park's main attractions. Its entrance was shaped like a giant clown's mouth, now cracked and faded. The group hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. The interior was dark, and the air was thick with dust. They turned on their flashlights, the beams cutting through the darkness. The funhouse was a maze of mirrors and winding corridors, designed to disorient and confuse. As they made their way through the maze, they heard a faint, echoing laughter. Alex turned to Chris, his face pale. "Did you hear that?" Chris nodded. "It's probably just the wind. This place is old and creaky." But the laughter grew louder, more distinct. It seemed to come from all around them, bouncing off the walls and mirrors. Lisa clutched Jen's arm, her eyes wide with fear. "We need to get out of here." They quickened their pace, their footsteps echoing in the narrow corridors. The laughter followed them, growing more manic and sinister. Finally, they burst through a door and found themselves outside, gasping for breath. Relieved to be out of the funhouse, the group decided to explore the rest of the park. They came across the old roller coaster, its tracks twisted and rusted. The coaster cars, once bright and cheerful, were now covered in grime. Chris climbed into one of the cars, grinning. "Come on, guys. Let's take a ride." Jen shook her head. "No way. That thing looks like it could fall apart any second." But Alex and Lisa joined Chris, laughing nervously. They pretended to be on a ride, their voices echoing through the empty park. Suddenly, the roller coaster creaked and groaned. The car jerked forward, sending Chris, Alex, and Lisa tumbling out. They scrambled to their feet, hearts pounding. Okay, that was creepy, Alex admitted. Maybe we should stick to exploring on foot. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the park, the group made their way to the Ferris wheel. The giant wheel loomed over them, its rusted metal frame creaking in the wind. Jen pointed to the top of the wheel. I heard that from up there, you could see the entire town. Must have been quite a view. Chris, ever the adventurer, started climbing the ladder to the top of the wheel. I'll check it out. Lisa and Alex watched nervously as Chris climbed higher and higher. When he reached the top, he waved down at them. You guys have to see this. But as they started to climb, a chilling wind swept through the park. The Ferris wheel groaned and began to turn slowly, creaking with every rotation. Chris clung to the frame, his face pale. Get down from there, Jen shouted. Chris hurried down the ladder, his heart racing. When he reached the ground, he looked up at the Ferris wheel, which had stopped moving. That was close. This place really is falling apart. The last attraction they visited was the haunted house. The dilapidated building was covered in ivy, and its windows were broken. The door creaked open as they approached, revealing a dark, musty interior. They stepped inside, their flashlights revealing old props and decorations. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling, and the air was thick with the smell of mold. As they explored the haunted house, they heard footsteps behind them. They turned around, but no one was there. The footsteps grew louder, echoing through the empty rooms. Jen felt a cold hand on her shoulder and screamed. She turned around, but there was nothing there. The group huddled together, their flashlights shaking. We need to get out of here, Alex said, his voice trembling. They made their way back to the entrance, the footsteps following them. When they finally stepped outside, they felt a wave of relief. As night fell, the group gathered around a small fire they had built near the entrance of the park. The eerie silence of the park was broken only by the crackling of the fire and the distant sound of the ocean. Jen pulled out the old map and spread it out on the ground. There's one place we haven't checked yet, the old theater. Lisa shook her head. I think we've seen enough for one day. This place is creepy as hell. But Chris, ever the thrill seeker, insisted, come on, it's our last stop. Let's check it out, and then we can leave. Reluctantly, they agreed and made their way to the theater. The theater was a grand old building, its entrance flanked by statues of angels, now cracked and weathered. The doors were slightly ajar, and they pushed them open, stepping into the darkness. The air inside was cold and stale. Their flashlights revealed rows of tattered seats and a stage covered in dust. As they moved further in, they noticed an old projector in the back of the room. Chris couldn't resist. He approached the projector and managed to turn it on. The projector whirred to life, casting a flickering light on the screen. The film that played was a black and white reel of the park in its heyday, filled with laughing children and happy families. Suddenly, the film changed. The images became distorted, showing scenes of chaos and terror. People were running and screaming, and shadowy figures loomed over them. The projector sputtered and died, plunging the theater back into darkness. A cold wind swept through the theater, and the group heard whispering voices around them. The temperature dropped rapidly, and they saw their breath misting in the air. Jen clutched Chris's arm. We need to go. Now. Panic set in as the group scrambled to leave the theater. The doors they had entered through were now locked, and they frantically searched for another exit. The whispering grew louder, more insistent, and the shadows seemed to close in on them. Finally, they found a side door and burst through it, stumbling into the night. They ran through the park, their footsteps echoing in the empty space. The park seemed to come alive with ghostly apparitions and distant screams. They reached the entrance gate, breathless and terrified. As they stepped outside, the eerie silence of the park was replaced by the familiar sounds of the night. They hurried to their car, eager to leave the haunted place behind. The group drove back to town in silence, each lost in their thoughts. The experience had shaken them to their core, and they couldn't shake the feeling that they had disturbed something that should have been left alone. The next day, they met at a cafe to discuss what had happened. Jen had done some research and discovered more about the park's dark history. It turned out that several people had died in accidents at the park, and it was rumored that the park's owner had been involved in dark rituals. "We need to report this," Chris said. "People should know what's out there." But Alex shook his head. "Who would believe us? They'll think we're crazy." Lisa agreed. "Maybe it's best if we just move on and forget about it." Reluctantly, they decided to keep their experience to themselves, but the memories of that night would haunt them forever. Years passed, and the group drifted apart. They tried to forget about the abandoned amusement park, but the memories lingered in the back of their minds. One day, Chris received a letter in the mail. It was from an anonymous sender, warning him that the park was being redeveloped and that the spirits within it were restless once more. He contacted Jen, Alex, and Lisa, and they decided to return to the park one last time. They hoped to put the spirits to rest and prevent anyone else from experiencing the horrors they had faced. When they arrived at the park, they found it in the process of being demolished. The once grand entrance was now a pile of rubble, and construction equipment littered the grounds. They made their way to the center of the park, where the funhouse once stood. There, they found a group of workers gathered around a strange, glowing figure. It was the spirit of the park's owner, his eyes filled with anger and despair. The group stood their ground, determined to confront the spirit. They recited the words of a ritual they had found in Jen's research, calling upon the spirits to find peace. The ground shook and the air grew cold. The spirit of the owner let out a terrifying scream before vanishing into thin air. The park fell silent once more. With the park finally at peace, the group felt a sense of closure. They knew that they had done the right thing, even if it had taken them years to do it. The abandoned amusement park was eventually demolished, and a new, modern park was built in its place. The group visited the new park together, creating new, happier memories to replace the haunting ones. But every now and then, as they walked through the new park, they couldn't help but feel a presence watching over them. They knew that the spirits of the past were finally at rest, and they were grateful for the peace they had found. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Share your own stories with us.